The September morning came quiet over Millhaven, too quiet, the kind of hush a small town falls into when it senses something it cannot name. 3 black SUVs rolled down Cedarwood Lane in slow procession tires, whispering across old gravel, stopping outside the smallest house on the street. Doors opened in unison. 3 young women stepped into the yard, dark coats, steady shoulders, faces carved by 15 years no one here had witnessed. The youngest lifted a small wooden bird into the light. Chipped wing, blue paint worn to the grain, as if a child's thumb had traced it. 1,000 long nights. The porch door groaned open. Thomas Calloway stepped out in a faded work shirt, squinting into the sun, and went still. These were the 3 faces the town had sworn he would never see again. 15 years. 1 morning. 1 buried truth. 15 years before those 3 black SUVs rolled down Cedarwood Lane, the smallest house on that street had already learned how to be quiet. Thomas Calloway was 41. The winter, the story begins, a carpenter by trade, and whatever the neighbors needed by necessity, the kind of man who could hang a door, rewire a porch light, or patch a roof for less than a fair day's wage. Because people in Millhaven, Tennessee, tended to measure a man by what he asked for. Thomas asked for little. That was how the town had always read him. His wife Carol had been gone 3 years by then. Cancer had taken 3 years of its own to do the work, long enough for him to learn every corridor of the county hospital. Short enough that he still caught himself in the blue hour before dawn, reaching across the bed for a warmth that had not been there in 1,000 nights. The house on Cedarwood Lane was the one his father had left him, low-slung and honest. 2 bedrooms and a kitchen, where Carol used to hum while she cooked. Now Thomas ate standing at the counter most nights. 1 bowl, 1 spoon, because setting a table for one had a way of making a man confront himself before he was ready. He was not unhappy. That was not the word. He was emptied slowly the way a well runs dry in a long summer, without anyone noticing until the bucket comes up light. Millhaven did not give itself easily to lonely men. It was a town of Sunday dinners and church parking lots, and the same names on the mailboxes, 3 generations deep. Thomas had been born there. By every measure that December, he would also die there. Then the phone rang. It was the 2nd Tuesday of December, and he had just come in from a job, patching a shed roof over on the Henderson place. His hands were still cold. The phone on the wall was the old kind. The cord kinked from 30 years of being stretched between counter and table, and when he picked it up, he knew the voice before the caller finished the first sentence. Margaret Owens had been his wife's friend. Before, she had been anyone's caseworker. She had sat in his kitchen during Carol's last spring, brought a casserole, stayed an hour after the plate was washed. She did not call for pleasantries. That was part of why he trusted her. "Thomas," she said, and he could hear in the single word that she had not slept. "I need a favor I have no right to ask." He set the coffee pot down without pouring. She told him about 3 girls, a mother 5 days dead in a car on the wrong side of a county road, a father not seen in 2 years, somewhere between a bottle and a bench in Nashville. 2 foster homes already refused complex psychological profile, the file said, which meant the oldest would not speak to strangers. The middle one had bitten an intake worker, and the little one had stopped eating for 3 days. A 3rd family had opened its door, but only for the youngest. Only for Wren. "How old?" Thomas asked. 12, 9, and 6. He closed his eyes. "If I cannot place them together by tomorrow morning, I have to split them. 3 counties, 3 different intake offices. The older 2 go into a group home by Friday." He did not answer. Somewhere in the kitchen, the clock above the stove made the small tick it had been making through every hour of Carol's illness. "I know what I'm asking," Margaret said. "I know your house. I know what this year has been for you. I would not be calling if I had anywhere else on earth to call." He let the silence stretch because he did not trust his voice yet. When it came flat and honest, the way he always spoke when he was afraid. Margaret. I have never raised a child. I do not know what shampoo girls use. I have $211 in a checking account until Friday. The upstairs radiator is held together with a clamp my father put on the year I was born. I am a single man in a town that watches single men the way a dog watches the screen door. I know. I cannot promise them anything. I am not asking you to promise them anything. I am asking you to open a door for 1 night, 2 nights, until I can find a better answer. And if you cannot find a better answer, Thomas, if you say no, they are still alive in the morning. I promise you that. But they will not have each other. The clock ticked. He looked around the kitchen. The cabinets Carol had repainted the last summer, she was strong. The empty chair across from his own. The placemat she had sewn still folded on the counter where he had put it the day of the funeral and never moved. Carol had wanted children. They had tried. It had not happened for them, and then there had not been time. Thomas did not need to wonder what his wife would have said if she had been standing beside him at that phone. He had known that woman for 20 years. "What time?" he said. "Do you need me to open the door?" Margaret's breath came out in a sound that was not quite a laugh. "I can have them to you by 9. "Bring blankets," he said. "I only have the 2. He hung up the phone. Nothing in the room had changed, but something in the man standing in the middle of that kitchen had shifted. For the first time in 3 years, Thomas Calloway walked to the closet at the end of the hall, pulled down the extra linens Carol had folded in her careful hand, and laid them on the empty bed in the spare room. Outside, it had begun to snow. Margaret's van pulled into the drive a little past 9, headlights cutting long white lines through the falling snow. Thomas watched from the kitchen window as 3 shapes unfolded themselves out of the back seat, small against the winter. The tallest came first, carrying a canvas duffel as if it held something breakable. Behind her came a girl who walked like she was daring the ground to hold her weight. And then, at the very back, half hidden in the folds of her sister's coat, a third so small he almost missed her, holding what looked like a folded pillowcase in both hands. He opened the door before Margaret had to knock. The oldest Lily did not meet his eyes. She swept the foyer the way a grown person checks a room for exits, then stepped across the threshold and let herself be introduced without offering her hand. June came in second and stopped in the middle of the kitchen, looking at Thomas, the way a stray dog looks at a stranger who is offered food, suspicious of the trick inside the kindness. Wren did not come in at all until Lily reached back and guided her, 2 fingers on the smallest sister's shoulder. "This is Thomas," Margaret said. "He was a friend of your mother's friend. He is going to help you stay together." Lily nodded once. Wren did not speak. June said, "For how long?" and the only answer Thomas had that night was the one he gave anyway. "For as long as you want to be here." The first week taught him what he did not know, and there was a great deal. He stood in the shampoo aisle of Patterson's grocery for 11 minutes, one Thursday, reading bottles the way he read legal contracts, until Dorothy from next door found him there and took him by the elbow to the right shelf. She taught him later, that Sunday, how to comb through tangles without making a child cry. He checked out books from the Millhaven Public Library on children and loss and read them at the kitchen table after the girls were asleep. The town watched. He felt the eyes at the post office the way conversations trimmed themselves down when he walked into the hardware store. A single man taking in 3 young girls, people did not have to say what they were thinking. He did what he had decided to do and let the town find its own peace with it. By the end of the first month, 3 small rituals had made a home in the house. Every night, Thomas walked the length of the short hallway, jiggled each door handle, touched each frame, and said softly, "You're safe tonight." The words had come the first night, when June had asked from the couch in the dark whether the door was locked, and something in the answer had made her let go of the arm she had been clenching. After the house had gone quiet, He sat at the kitchen table with a small block of basswood and a carpenter's knife and carved birds. The first bird, clumsy, one wing wider than the other, sat by the salt shaker for 2 nights before Wren came out in her nightgown, pointed at it without a word, and did not leave until he had placed it in her hand. And every Sunday, stew. 4 chairs, 4 bowls, no one up until everyone was done. June tested the rule twice. Lily never did. By the 4th Sunday, Wren pulled her chair in without being asked. In late January, Thomas walked into the county clerk's office with a folder of forms he had filled out by hand and filed a petition to adopt all 3 of them. The paperwork would take months to work through the system. He filed it anyway. The storm came the 2nd week of January, harder than the radio had promised. The power went out a little after 8. Thomas lit the oil lamps and made the best show of a game he could shadow puppets. Popcorn on the wood stove. June actually laughing once at his impression of a rabbit that could not decide which ear to raise first. For a little while the house held, then outside something cracked. A tree limb close enough to shake the window glass, and Wren, curled into Lily's side on the kitchen floor, was on her feet before anyone had named the noise. She ran the way a child runs inside a memory, and by the time Thomas understood what was happening, the back door was open and Wren was gone into the dark. He did not put on a coat. He did not put on boots. He called her name into the wind until it took his voice and gave him nothing back, and he kept calling it, moving along the fence line toward the ditch behind the house, because that was where a small body running blind would naturally fall. He found her there, waist deep in a drift, her nightgown soaked through, shaking so hard she could not make a sound. He went down on his knees and pulled her against his chest and turned his back into the wind and walked her home, bent over, like a man carrying something more fragile than he was worth. Lily and June were on the back porch in their socks when he came through the white. Lily's knees went out from under her for 1 second before she caught herself on the railing. Wren came up warm by morning. Thomas went down. The fever took him on the 2nd day. 5 days he spent in the back bedroom breathing like a man pulling a rope through water. Dorothy came over to help, and Frank from across the street, but the 3 girls were the ones who did the looking. Lily, who had never cooked anything more complicated than toast, learned how to make broth by watching Dorothy once. June carried water to his bedside without being asked. Wren sat in the doorway of the bedroom hour after hour, the first wood bird cupped in both her hands, watching him. The way a child watches a door she is afraid will close. On the 5th morning, when the fever finally broke, Thomas saw on top of his pill bottle a square of paper folded into quarters. He opened it with hands that still shook. 3 lines of handwriting, 3 children's hands. In Lily's careful block letters, "Please get better. We're still here." In June's crooked scrawl, "Don't you dare leave." And at the bottom, the smallest letters of all, drawn slow and shaky the way a child draws them the first 100 times. Home. Us. Thomas turned his face to the wall, and for the first time since Carol had died, he let himself cry, and he did it alone, because that was the only way he knew how. After the storm, something in the house had changed the way real things change, slowly and without announcement. Wren began to reach for his hand when a loud sound came from outside. June stopped looking for reasons to be sent away, and one afternoon in late January, Thomas noticed that the canvas duffel Lily had kept packed under her bed since the first night was gone. The clothes put away in the dresser, the bag folded on the closet shelf, empty. He did not say a word to her about it. He did not have to. The newspaper article came in February, a small piece bottom of page 3, a feature on a Millhaven carpenter who had taken in 3 sisters so they would not be split across 3 counties. 10 days later, a black sedan stopped in front of the house, and out of it stepped a man and a woman, dressed for a life Thomas had never been invited into. Gerald Holt was tall and thin, and carried himself the way men carry themselves when they have not had to wait for anything in a long time. Patricia Holt wore a cashmere coat the color of river stones and a string of pearls that had belonged to her own mother. They introduced themselves on the porch with the formal courtesy of people who had practiced the sentences in the car. Grandparents. Boston. They would like if Mr. Calloway did not mind to meet their granddaughters. Thomas did not slam the door. He opened it. The Holts were not cruel. That was what made them dangerous. They sat on his second-hand couch and drank coffee from mugs Carol had bought at a craft fair, and they spoke about private schools in Brookline and a college fund that had been growing since the day the oldest granddaughter was born, and they did not once raise their voices. They had, Patricia said, been estranged from the girl's mother for reasons that had to do with a husband they had begged her not to marry and a life they had watched her lose. They were prepared, Gerald said, to correct that now. Lily was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, listening, when Patricia turned to her with a careful smile and said, "Sweetheart, we know this is a lot." Lily took one step forward into the living room and spoke for the first time since the Holts had sat down. "You didn't care about blood when Mama was alive." Patricia's careful smile came off her face, the way a bandage comes off a wound. "I'm sorry. You didn't call her. She called you. I remember. I was 8. She sat on the stairs and cried because you wouldn't come to the phone." Something in the room adjusted itself. Whatever the Holts had come to Millhaven to collect, they understood now that they would not be collecting it across a coffee table in an afternoon. They left before dark. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from a law firm on Beacon Street, informing Thomas that the Holts were petitioning for legal custody, that Thomas's own pending adoption petition would be contested, and that a court date had been set. Thomas did not have money for a lawyer. The county assigned him a public defender named Wesley Porter, a tired, decent man carrying 40 other cases, who told Thomas honestly in the parking lot outside the courthouse that he would do everything he could, but the other side had come in heavy. The other side had come in as Eleanor Price, a family law attorney. The Holts had flown in from Boston, known in 3 states for winning custody cases, the way surgeons win operations. Not with drama, but with precision. Thomas wore a suit he had borrowed from Frank across the street. It was one size too big in the shoulders. Margaret Owens went up first for his side. She told the court about the December phone call about the 2 families that had turned the girls away, about the 3rd that had wanted only Wren, about the man who had said yes that night when nothing in his life said he should. Her voice broke once. When Margaret stepped down, Eleanor Price rose from the opposing table and asked 3 questions. "Ms. Owens, how long had you known Mr. Calloway before you placed 3 minor children in his home?" "Personally, 9 years. Professionally, that was our first. Thank you." "How many licensed foster families is your office currently short in this county alone?" 17. "Thank you." "Were you aware at the time of the placement that Mr. Calloway was 3 months behind on his electric bill?" Margaret did not answer for a second. "I was not aware of that." "No." "Thank you. No further questions." Margaret left the stand with her chin up and her hands trembling. Thomas went up next. Eleanor Price introduced documents into evidence the way a teacher hands out worksheets. A city inspector's report on the condition of the roof. Federal tax filings showing an income below the poverty threshold for a household of 4. No dental insurance on record for any of the 3 minor children. No college savings account opened in any of their names. His adoption petition still in process, not yet finalized. To each, Thomas answered the only way he knew how. "Yes. Yes, I'm working on it." "Not yet." Eleanor Price set her stack of papers down on the rail in front of him. She looked at him for a long time, and when she asked her last question, she asked it almost gently, the way a person asks a question they already know the weight of. "Mr. Calloway, if the situation were reversed If you were the grandparent with the home, the insurance, the trust fund, and someone in your current circumstances were raising your 3 grandchildren, would you agree with the decision you are asking this court to make today? The courtroom went quiet. Thomas turned his head. In the row behind the bar sat the 3 girls shoulder to shoulder. Lily was looking straight at him. Her mouth was a flat line. She shook her head the smallest shake, barely a motion at all. And Thomas understood, because he had been learning to read this child for 2 months, that she was not telling him what to say. She was telling him not to lie. He turned back toward the bench. It took him a long time to speak. "I want what is best for them," he said. "I don't know today what that is." In the row behind the bar, Lily closed her eyes. That answer, not the roof, not the bank account, not the unfinalized adoption, ended the hearing. Judge Harriet Doyle took a recess. When she came back, she spent an entire paragraph on the record acknowledging what Thomas Calloway had done. Then she said that under Tennessee law, weighing the material facts and noting that his adoption filing had not yet been finalized, custody would transfer to the maternal grandparents. Thomas placed one hand flat on the table in front of him and kept it there until the gavel came down. The court allowed them 20 minutes. The room they were given was narrow and windowless, a square table bolted to the floor, 4 chairs. Thomas came in, carrying a paper grocery bag. Margaret waited just outside the door, watching through the glass. He reached into the bag first for a book, a paperback corners, soft from use. Spine creased in a dozen places, a collection of short stories. He placed it in front of Lily. "Your mother read this book 20 times, he said. "Her notes are in the margins in pencil. She would want you to have it. Maybe you'll figure out why she underlined the parts she did. Maybe you won't. Either way, it's yours now." Lily looked at the book, the way a person looks at a wound they are not ready to touch. Her hand went out anyway. He reached into the bag again for a carpenter's pencil flat, and stubby one end chewed the same pencil he had used to sign his adoption petition at the clerk's counter the month before. "This one marks just about anything," he told June, closing her fingers around it. "Wood, metal, drywall, paper if you hold it sideways, including a life, June. You hold on to that. You mark yours however you want." June's face did a thing he had never seen it do before. It did not cry. It did not yell. It tightened the way a fist tightens, and the little girl who had spent 2 months daring everyone around her to send her away held a stubby carpenter's pencil like she was never going to let it go. Last, he reached for the smallest object in the bag, a wood bird. Blue paint, still tacky because he had finished it at 3 in the morning. He knelt down so his face was level with Wren's. "You keep this one," he said. "I keep the one I already made for you at the house. That way, we each have one. And the day you come back to me, whenever that is, Wren, you bring this one with you. Even if I am old. Even if I forget a lot of things by then. You hold this up, and I will know it is you." Wren did not speak. She took the blue bird in both hands and pressed it against her chest and did not let go. The first bird, the clumsy one with the wider wing, stayed in her bedroom drawer, back on Cedarwood Lane. Thomas would find it the next morning and move it to the kitchen shelf above the stove where it would live for 15 years. Lily's voice when it came was so thin it almost wasn't there. "Then why does it feel like this?" June put her hand over her mouth and began to swear low and steady every word she had ever been told not to say, until Margaret opened the door and walked her out into the hallway. Wren climbed into Thomas's lap on the courthouse floor and fisted both hands in his shirt and pulled until a button came loose, and she said, "No. No," and no one in the world could have told her what to do with that word. Thomas knelt on that tile floor and held all 3 of them, and he did not try to hide that he was crying, because the time for that had passed. "If you forget anything," he said low into their hair, "don't forget this. I wanted you. Every day. I wanted you The bailiff knocked at the 20-minute mark. Thomas walked them out to the hallway, watched Gerald and Patricia Holt take the hands of 3 children he had known for 4 months, watched those 3 children get put into the back of a black car, and watched the car turn left out of the courthouse parking lot and disappear onto the interstate. He drove home. He parked in the driveway. He sat in the truck for a long time with the engine off. When he finally came inside, the house was as quiet as it had been the night before Margaret called, except that this time the quiet meant something entirely different. He wrote every week the first year. He wrote to Lily about what he was building in the shop out back. He wrote to June about whether she was still using the pencil. He wrote to Wren in simple words, with drawings in the margins, small birds with different colored wings. None of the letters came back. None of them brought an answer either. What he did not know was that they were not reaching the girls. Patricia Holt had a room off the front hall that the housekeeper called the mail room, and every piece of correspondence that came into the house passed across a small marble-topped desk there before it went anywhere else. Thomas's envelopes went into a lower drawer. He drove up once in the 3rd month, 12 hours straight. He stood at the iron gate of the house on Beacon Street and asked the man at the intercom politely whether he might speak to his daughters. Then a lawyer's voice came back on and told Thomas that if he wished to avoid a formal complaint of harassment being filed with the Brookline Police Department, he should not return. Thomas did not return. He drove the 12 hours home. He did not stop except for gas. After the 2nd year, he stopped writing. He stopped because he had begun to believe with the slow certainty of a man who has spent 2 years shouting into a closed room that his voice was hurting children who had already been hurt enough. He put the pen down one Sunday morning and did not pick it up again. On the other end of that silence, in a house with a mailroom his daughters did not know, existed a different kind of work was underway. When Lily turned 18, Patricia Holt invited her into the study one evening after dinner and laid out a folder on the desk between them. Inside was a trust, full tuition, private school already paid for undergraduate committed graduate school if she needed it, and the same for both her sisters. It came with a single condition. No contact with Mr. Calloway, Patricia said, until Wren turns 21. Lily sat with that for a long time. Patricia drew out a second document. It was a letter typed, dated just after the custody transfer, signed in what looked like Thomas Calloway's hand. In it, the man who had given Lily a book of her mother's short stories wrote that he was no longer able to continue, that his continued contact was making the girl's adjustment harder, that he was asking formally, respectfully to be left alone. Patricia also showed her an accounting entry, $5,000 labeled transition support, recorded as paid out to Thomas Calloway in the months after the hearing. The check had never actually been written. The accounting entry was invented. Lily did not know that. What Lily knew at 18 was that she had sat in the back of a courtroom 6 years earlier and watched a man she loved tell a judge that he did not know what was best for her. She knew she had spent 6 years in a house that had never felt like home, and that her 2 sisters would need money for school and doctors and futures she could not yet see. She knew what Patricia Holt was offering. She knew what Patricia Holt was taking. She read the letter twice. The signature looked right. Nothing in her 18-year-old eyes had been trained to see a forgery. She signed. She did not tell her sisters the full story. She told them only what she thought they could carry. "Grandmother is covering our education," she said, sitting on the edge of June's bed that night. "For all 3 of us. The condition is that we do not contact Dad until Wren is 21. I have thought about it. This is the best option we have." June was 15 and already drifting, already furious at something she could not name, and she fought Lily for 40 minutes before she agreed. Wren was 12 and had not seen Thomas in 6 years, and she looked at Lily and said only, "Okay." Lily carried that signature into the rest of her life, the way a person carries a stone in a shoe, not loudly, not visibly, but with every step. She chose law. She chose child welfare. She chose specifically the preservation of sibling groups across foster placements. Every case she won was a penance she did not know she was paying. And Thomas Calloway, on the other end of the silence she had signed, spent the next 13 years believing that his daughters had reasonably and rightfully forgotten him. 13 years became 15, the way time does in a house where nothing is coming. Thomas was 56, the autumn Patricia Holt died, though he did not yet know she had. Gerald Holt had gone first 2 winters before. Thomas did not know that either. He knew only his own weather now. His heart gave the county doctor concern. The mortgage was past due, and the roof was held up in one corner by a blue plastic tarp. He still cooked stew every Sunday. 1 pot, 1 bowl, 1 spoon. He still walked the short hallway every night, jiggled each door handle, and said softly into rooms that had been empty 15 years. "You're safe tonight." The rooms had not been rearranged. Lily's books still sat on the shelf in the order a 12-year-old had put them in. The top drawer of June's dresser still caught. Wren's bed still sat by the east window. On the kitchen shelf above the stove, where he had moved it the morning after the courthouse stood, the clumsy first bird, the one with the one wing wider than the other. Patricia Holt died in October. The lawyers called the sisters to Boston for the estate. They were grown women by then. Lily had become a child welfare attorney at a nonprofit in New York, 3 years out of law school, specializing in the preservation of sibling groups. June was the youngest crew lead at a construction firm in Nashville. Wren had graduated early and spent her 21st year as a volunteer on the pediatric oncology floor outside Boston, sitting with children who had not learned yet how to say what was wrong. They had not spoken Thomas's name out loud to each other in years. They had all 3 kept something. It was in Patricia's study on the second afternoon that Lily found the key to a private safe behind a hinged panel in the bookshelf. Inside were 2 things that would undo 15 years of her life in the space of an hour. The first was a bundle of letters, dozens of envelopes tied with twine, everyone addressed in Thomas Calloway's hand. The top envelope was dated 9 days after the custody transfer. The bottom was dated almost 2 years later. None had been opened. Lily sat on the study floor with those envelopes in her lap and did not move for a long time. The second thing was a manila folder labeled in her grandmother's handwriting Calloway Transition. Inside were copies of the trust she had signed at 18, the accounting entry for the $5,000 supposedly paid to Thomas, and the typed letter she had read that night. It was Lily, now a lawyer who had spent the years since law school reading real documents for a living, who saw what the girl of 18 could not. The signature was a good imitation, but it was an imitation. The letters pressed too hard. The capital T closed on itself at the top. She held the hand-addressed name on one of the unopened envelopes up next to the signature, and the forgery lay down plain as day. She called Margaret Owens, still at the county office in Millhaven. What Margaret had kept quietly against policy was a second file. 47 phone calls logged over 2 years, all from Thomas, asking how to reach his daughters through a neutral intermediary. A Polaroid of a thin man in a work coat standing outside the Iron Gate on Beacon Street in late 2013. The man in the photograph was so gaunt, Lily almost did not recognize him. That night in the hotel room, she told her sisters. June heard it out without speaking. Then she stood, walked to the window, and turned around with a face Lily had not seen in 15 years. "You had no right," June said. "Do you know what I have thought about myself for 15 years? Do you know what I thought he must have seen in me to decide we were not worth the fight?" "June." Wren's voice came from the other bed, small as it had always been. "Stop." "No. I want her to say it." Lily's hands were flat on her knees. "I had no right." Wren walked to the space between her sisters, a 21-year-old woman who had once been the 6-year-old in the ditch, and she spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who had once had no words. Lily was 18, grandmother was 68, and had been deceiving people since before any of us were born. That was not a fair fight. She did not betray us. Grandmother betrayed all of us. Lily was just the first of us she got to. June's shoulders came down by a fraction. Not forgiveness, a start. "We are going home," Ren said. "Tomorrow." They did not arrive quietly. June chose the 3 SUVs. "This town watched him lose," she said. "It is going to watch him win." Ren argued for something simpler. Lily made the final call. "Every small town has a Thomas Calloway," she said. "And every small town has a judge who rules against him for the same reasons. If we walk in loudly, somebody's niece 3 towns over reads about it on a Sunday and doesn't sign what she otherwise would have signed." They drove through the night. The youngest of the 3 women on the lawn lifted her hand. In it was the small, blue-painted wooden bird Thomas had placed in her palm across a courthouse table 15 years before. Thomas took the first step down off the porch before he knew he had taken it. Lily spoke first. Her voice broke on the second word. "Dad, we didn't know. We did not know you were writing." Ren reached him before he reached her. Then June. Then Lily. 4 people holding each other in the front yard that had not contained the sound of a single sob in 15 years, and Thomas cried in front of the whole town, and this time did not hide it. Inside the house told its own story. Lily, who had spent years reading a room, saw the kitchen table set for 1. June, who built towers for a living, climbed the attic ladder and saw the blue tarp. Ren, who had sat beside enough scared children to recognize the weight of a full pill bottle, counted the bottles on the bathroom counter. On the kitchen shelf above the stove stood the clumsy first bird, with one wing wider than the other, and next to it a small stack of unsent letters written in the last 5 years, some addressed only to my daughters, because Thomas no longer had current addresses for them. Ren put her hand on the first bird. Thomas watched her do it. Neither of them said anything. Lily opened her laptop at the kitchen table before anyone had taken off a coat, and by the end of the afternoon, she had found 2 errors in Thomas's mortgage and rewritten the terms. June was on the roof by 4 o'clock with a measuring tape calling a supplier she knew in Knoxville. Ren sat Thomas down with his pill bottles and went through them one by one, the way she had gone through dozens of charts on the pediatric floor. Thomas tried to object. The 3 of them ignored him with the stubbornness he had given them. Surviving alone. Ren said, setting down the last bottle is not the same as living well, Dad. That second night, long after June and Ren had gone to bed, Lily came into the kitchen where Thomas was drying the last bowl. She laid on the counter a photocopy of the letter she had signed at 18. Thomas read it. He saw before the 3rd line that it was not his handwriting, because it was his, almost, but not the way he shaped his own tea. Lily was braced for him to be angry. 15 years of waiting to be angry, and she could not throw all of it at a dead woman alone. Thomas laid the letter down. His voice was very tired. "You were 18. She was 68. That was not a fair fight." Lily put her face in her hands. He walked around the counter and put a hand on her shoulder, the same quiet weight he had put there the first night she had arrived in his house at 12, the night she had refused to unpack her canvas duffel. On Thursday, the mayor asked all 4 of them to speak at the town meeting. Thomas came in a suit that had not been pressed in 10 years. Ren had done that. June had reset the cuff. Lily had bought him a new tie on the drive-in. Lily spoke first. 15 years ago, this town watched a man take in 3 girls nobody wanted. He did not have money. He did not have guarantees. He had a decision to stay, and he made it. This town watched him later lose a courtroom, not because he was wrong, but because he refused under oath to lie. We are not standing here to rewrite that story. We are standing here to make sure no other child in Millhaven ever has to live it. June spoke next, shorter than her sister, steadier than anyone in the room had ever heard her. When people said he was not enough, they meant he did not have enough money. What they missed is that he gave us the one thing nobody had given us before. He stayed. Ren's voice was the smallest, and it reached the back of the room anyway. Every night of my childhood in this house, he checked the locks. And then he said, "You're safe tonight." We believed him before we believed anybody else in the world. Together, the three of them announced the establishment of the Callaway House Emergency Support for Low-Income Foster Families in the county, built to keep sibling groups together and provide legal aid counseling and short-term funding. Seed funding came directly from Patricia Holt's estate, my grandmother. Lily said, "Is going to pay back what she took. She will not be here to know it. That is fine." The whole room came to its feet. Thomas stood because June and Ren stood with him, one on each side, their arms under his. That night, 4 bowls on the kitchen table. The pot in the middle was fuller than it had been in any season either could remember. A light rain came in and did not find the attic. The sound of 3 women's voices moved from room to room in the house. Late after the dishes, Thomas walked the short hallway, the way he had walked it every night for 15 years. He jiggled the handle on the first door. He touched the frame on the second. He turned toward the third and stopped. His 3 daughters were standing in the hallway waiting for him as if they had known. The old words came on their own. "You're safe tonight." Ren's eyes shone. She shook her head once the way her oldest sister had shaken her head at him in a courtroom across 15 years. "No, Daddy. Tonight you are. Fatherhood does not belong to the richest man in the room, or the man whose name is on the legal papers, or the man a town finds easiest to trust. It belongs to the man who opens a door when he has almost nothing left, and who stays when staying is the most expensive thing a human being can do. And sometimes, children need 15 years. Not to forget, but to grow old enough to come back and repair what should never have been broken.